What if I told you the legendary Templar treasure has nothing to do with the chest of gold buried on a remote island? What if the real treasure, the one they could never seize, never burn, never destroy, is the very financial system that powers the global economy today? And here is one more thing you should know. That superstition you carry about Friday the 13th, that comes from this story too. Let's step into history. In the year 1119, 9 French knights arrived at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem with a modest proposal. They would protect pilgrims on the treacherous roads of the Holy Land. No wages, no land required. Just shelter in the ruins of Solomon's Temple. Their leader was a nobleman named Hugh de Payon, and to the casual observer, this small band of warrior monks looked like nothing more than a charitable afterthought of the Crusades. They were about to become the world's first multinational bank. The problem every crusading pilgrim faced was simple and deadly. How do you travel 2,000 miles through bandit-infested territory, carrying enough gold to fund your journey? The Templars invented the answer. Walk into the Temple Church in Paris, deposit your gold, and receive a handwritten, coded letter, a document encrypted to your personal identity, describing the deposit in terms no thief could easily forge or decode. Arrive weeks later at a Templar preceptory in Jerusalem, present the letter, and receive the equivalent value in local currency. The gold never moved. The risk never materialized. This was the world's first letter of credit, the direct ancestor of the wire transfer sitting on your banking app right now. Underpinning all of it were meticulous daily ledgers, every transaction logged with names, dates, amounts, and cashier notations, copies dispatched to central archives. This was double-entry bookkeeping, centuries before Renaissance Italy claimed to have invented it. The Paris Temple alone functioned as a de facto central bank for the French crown. But here is what gave this system its truly extraordinary power. In 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a papal bull known as Omne Datum Optimum, and with it, he created something the world had never seen before. The Knights Templar were exempted from every secular law, every local tax, and every jurisdiction on earth, except his own. They could cross any border, operate in any kingdom, and owe tribute to no king. Customs agents could not stop their ships. Bishops could not excommunicate their members. They were, in the language of modern finance, the world's first truly offshore entity, a transnational institution structured entirely beyond the reach of national tax authority. This sovereign immunity fueled explosive growth. At the order's peak, the Templars operated more than 870 commanderies, fortified estates stretching from the Atlantic coast of Portugal to the banks of the River Jordan. Each one was a local node in a global financial network, accepting deposits, issuing letters of credit, managing estates, lending capital, and exchanging currencies across jurisdictions. No institution in history had attempted anything like it. Now consider the theological trap they navigated with remarkable cleverness. Christian doctrine strictly forbade the charging of interest on loans. The Templars solved this with elegant accounting fiction. They did not charge interest, they charged fees. A loan carried a service charge for the scribes who processed the documents. A borrower paid rent on the gold he was temporarily using. Currency exchange carried a built-in margin that nobody called interest. These semantic disguises were the 14th century equivalents of the offshore shell structures and derivative instruments the ultra-wealthy use today to move money across tax jurisdictions without technically breaking any law. The architecture is almost identical. Only the terminology has changed. And here is something even more structurally remarkable. The Templar letter of credit system was functionally a distributed ledger. value recorded as a cryptographic entry, verifiable at any network node, without physically transporting the underlying asset. In 2026, that is the precise architecture of blockchain-based settlement and decentralized finance. This is not a metaphor. It is the same engineering logic, separated by 7 centuries. By the late 13th century, the Templars had become the primary lenders to European monarchies. They financed King Louis VII's Second Crusade. They held the ransom funds when Richard the Lionheart was captured in Austria. Most consequentially, they became the personal bankers of King Philip IV of France, managing his royal accounts as his debts climbed toward catastrophe. Philip IV had a pattern that historians find deeply chilling. In 1306, he expelled France's entire Jewish population and seized their assets. He then plundered the Lombard bankers operating in the kingdom. The Templars were his third target, and by far the largest. When a debtor is also the most powerful man in France, repayment is optional. Destruction is far more efficient. As dawn broke on Friday, October 13th, 1307, Philip's agents executed the most coordinated mass arrest in medieval history. Templars across France were seized simultaneously, charged with heresy, idolatry, and crimes against God. The charges were almost certainly fabricated. Confessions extracted under brutal torture, later recounted. But the legal mechanism served its purpose. The assets of the order would be forfeit to the crown. Except, when Philip's soldiers arrived at the Templar treasuries, the treasure was gone. The night before the arrests, the entire Templar fleet at La Rochelle, 18 heavily loaded galleys, had vanished from the harbor. Where they went remains one of history's most debated mysteries. Scotland, Portugal, and Switzerland all appear in the historical record as candidate destinations. That date, by the way, is where the Friday the 13th superstition begins. October 13th, 1307. The day an institution was destroyed, but not before it moved its most important assets out of reach. In the aftermath, the order's last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake on March 18, 1314. According to contemporary accounts, he called out from the flames with a curse, summoning both King Philip IV and Pope Clement V before the court of God before the year was out. Both men were dead within 12 months. Historians still debate the coincidence. History is rarely without its poetic justice. The intellectual treasure, however, was never hidden at all. It survived openly, encoded in the institutions that followed. The Portuguese chapter of the order survived intact, rebranding itself as the Order of Christ, and its red cross on white insignia would later mark the sails of Vasco da Gama's ships rounding the Cape of Good Hope. The Templar financial legacy, quite literally, funded the age of exploration. The Swiss banking model, politically neutral, operating across borders, offering client secrecy and asset protection against predatory governments, mirrors the Templar architecture almost precisely. The Inner Temple and Middle Temple in London still operate today as centers of English law and finance, and they bear the order's name because they were once its property. Every time you use a letter of credit, a currency exchange, a trust structure designed to protect assets from government seizure, or a peer-to-peer digital transaction that requires no central bank, you are operating inside a financial system the Templars designed 9 centuries ago. The legendary Templar treasure was never a chest of gold buried on an island. It was the system itself, borderless, decentralized, and structured to outlast any king who tried to destroy it. And as decentralized finance reshapes the global economy in 2026, returning power to peer-to-peer networks with no single point of failure and no sovereign intermediary required, you have to ask yourself, did the Templars bury their treasure, or did they simply build it into the future? History isn't just about dates and battles. It's about the ideas powerful enough to survive the people who tried to bury them. What would you have done, standing at that harbor in La Rochelle, as those 18 ships disappeared into the darkness? Drop your thoughts below, and keep exploring the past with us.